Hello everyone and welcome to the Maxon booth here at NAB East. I am your host Matthias Omatola, aka Major VFX if you're on all the Instawebs and all that fun stuff. I'm accompanied by, to my right, a longtime friend, amazing presenter, Hassenfratz. For those of you, a lot of you know him, he's a longtime educator and presenter with us. And happy to have you here, man. It's good to be back out.
It's good to be in New York City. I haven't been here in like 7 years.
It's been a minute. So we're back. For those of you who are tuning in, if you're just tuning in, or if you're here, make sure to get your badge scanned if you have one. If not, register on 3D Motion Show. We're giving away an amazing Dell laptop. I use it myself on all the shows. It's really great for Redshift, if you're looking at GPU rendering, all that fun stuff, as well as a Sense Lab tablet. And that's going to be for anybody who registers during the show or on 3D Motion Show, as well as at Adobe Max. So check those out. Thanks to our sponsors. And without further ado, Hassenfratz.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you, everyone. There's a good crowd today. Dang, awesome crowd. Thank you so much for coming out. And hello on the interwebs. I don't know which camera is the interwebs, but hi, everyone on the interweb. Okay, that one. Hi, interwebs. Thanks for tuning in today. My name is Hassenfratz. I'm creative director at School of Motion. How many people have heard of School of Motion? Amazing, so I don't need to hard sell you on that. But yeah, we have a bunch of cool courses there. I teach a couple of them, and we teach all things Cinema 4D. So if you're new to Cinema 4D or you're quite experienced, got awesome classes for you. We've also been putting some like awesome content on our YouTube channel, so go on the YouTubes. Yeah, so let me just give you a little bit of an idea of like what type of work I do and all the crazy kind of stuff I get into, at least for, I don't do much professional work these days. It's all like personal work, which is a blessing to be able to do that kind of stuff. But let me just show you a little bit of an idea of the type of work that I do. And even though I've been using PC for like 2 years now, I still don't know the buttons, so apologize for that. But here we go. Here's my reel. All right, so I like to do like kind of crazy character-y kind of stuff, but today we're actually going to be doing something completely different because, let me get back to where is that, do this. All right, so how many people are on Cinema 4D 2023 or 26? Any of the last two versions? All right, not a bunch of people. So, all right, everyone else that's not on that versions, I'm going to show you why you should be, because there's some pretty incredible stuff that has been added to Cinema 4D 26 that got even more features added to it in Cinema 4D 2023, and that is, don't jump the gun. And that is the new simulation system. So you all know and love the old dynamic system. You like right click, put the rigid body or soft body tag in something, and it's like a video game. It's like so much fun to play with. But for the longest time I was like, man, this is great and all, but like it's not stable, it's kind of slow, and you start seeing all these people on Houdini and they're making amazing stuff and you get so jealous and you're like, I wish I could do that. I'm here to tell you that we're getting there. We're getting there in Cinema 4D. I'm like paying attention to what Houdini people are doing, and I'm like, I wonder if I could do that with the new simulations. And most of the time I can get pretty dang close. So to kind of show you what can be achieved in a new simulation system, and for those of you who might be unfamiliar, in S26, they totally revamped the cloth and the spline dynamics, which is now called rope. And then in 2023, they added the new soft bodies on top of it, and it's particle-based system. So it's super fast, super stable. You don't have exploding polygons or anything like that. But let me stop blabbing and just showing this black screen. Let me actually show you some of the stuff that I've been experimenting with the new cloth system and rope systems in Cinema 4D. Stop. Okay, there we go. So a little bit of that kind of stuff is what we are now able to do. And like stuff like this, like I saw this being done in Houdini. So I was like, let me try to do that. Same thing with this kind of stuff, like the very high detail cloth, the twist thing. I've been seeing being done in like X particles all the time. So it's just really incredible to be able to get this kind of stuff. Like I am continually amazed with what you can accomplish with the new Cinema 4D cloth. And if you want to kind of get like an overview of the cloth, you can definitely check out like School of Motion YouTube. I just did a tutorial on there just to kind of get up and running in it. But let me just show you like super basic stuff with the cloth and just like how far you can push it. So here we have a plane object. It's subdivided pretty high, you know. So let's go ahead and let's just right click simulation tags cloth. So the old system is still there. It's just all this stuff, but you don't want to really use this anymore because this is just way better. And then what we're going to do is let's hit Control or Command D, go to simulation. So here is our scene and simulation settings. So just like the old bullet system where you had like the expert tab and all that stuff, we still have that. Just move to the simulation system. There's a bunch of new settings and stuff like that. But let's just quickly turn off gravity here. And actually, no. Let's leave on gravity because let's show something. Let me just right click. If you right click on any of these arrows, it resets it to default. So if you don't know that, pro tip right there. Let's just leave that there. And let's grab a sphere. It's not shiny because that's Nick's domain, which he'll show it a little bit later, I'm sure. But so just like the old dynamic system, if you want to have an object be a collider, you just right click, simulation tags, collider, and then you hit play, and then magic ensues. And you're going to see that this is, yes, thank you, and that is the end of the presentation. Any questions? No. You're going to see we have all the subdivisions here from that low subdivided sphere. So I'm just going to crank up those segments and get more evenly spaced segments there by going to hexahedron. And we got this going on, and that's looking really nice. We can, let's go into our settings here. And some of the most important settings, and it's a little bit hard to wrap your mind around all these new settings, like in the old soft body system, and they had different terms for different things. Bendiness is basically how many wrinkles do you get on your cloth. So if I do like 99999, we're going to have a lot more wrinkly stuff going on. And if we up the segments, we're going to get even more detail. So let's see how far. Let's do 200 by 200. Let's get a little crazy here and see what kind of fine wrinkle detail we got. Look at that. And we're running in the viewport here too, pretty nicely. But there's a whole bunch of different things to keep in mind with where depending on how finely subdivided your mesh is, gets more wrinkles. If you have a high bendiness number here, stretchiness, very aptly named. It's just how much does this stretch. And we always got to think of things in terms of particles because this is a particle-based system. So think of like each edge or each vertice being a little particle in a particle system. Bounciness, friction, like all of these are very aptly named. Stickiness is really awesome. Basically what this presentation is going to be today is like me barely getting through all the cool things you can do and just trying to show you some of the stuff you can do. Let's go to some of these settings here. So simulation, very important thing two important things. One is the thing that controls the stiffness of cloth is substeps. in these smoothing iterations. So the higher these numbers, the more stiff your cloth will be, but the more accurate your cloth will be as well. So that's a little bit of like a little gotcha where it's like, well, I want this to be a more accurate simulation. So if I bring this to like 60, and let's actually bring down some of the segments here, like 120, 120, and hit play, you're going to see that this is like a much stiffer cloth. If we bring the sub-steps up to even like 100, you're going to see how that tightens a little bit. Now, if I bring this down to 5, whoop, so it's less accurate, but because it's less accurate, it's also a little more loosey-goosey, so a little more give to that. So if you want to have looser cloth, not so stiff, bring in a lower number of sub-steps, and you can see how much more loose that is. And then these iterations are basically like multipliers on these sub-steps. Smoothing iterations is very important. With the old dynamic system, one of the things that would always happen is like you'd have a dynamic simulation. It looks awesome, but things like are jittering and popping. This is exactly what you would up to kind of solve that type of stuff. And you can even see as I'm upping this number, how much more stiff this cloth is getting. So just something to keep in mind. Damping kind of just removes more energy from the simulation. So it's going to look like your cloth's underwater. So very brief overview. It's like a little ghost. Like, woo. And this is where like dynamics just become like super, super fun, is because this is running so nicely on this computer and you just get these really nice wrinkles and all this kind of stuff. But anyways, let's go in, like that's your basic overview. So very important, the sub-steps, all these settings here. Another important thing is scale. Now, no matter what you're doing, whether it's lighting, it's camera work, any physics-based stuff like light fall-offs and all that stuff, one of the biggest mistakes I see in our students that come to School of Motion that have like never used 3D before is they don't pay attention to the scene scale. They don't model things to real world scale. And so if you look at like this cube, the radius and everything is in centimeters in Cinema 4D. So 20 centimeters, I'm pretty terrible with measurement, but like 20 centimeters is like what, that, right? 12 inches, is that 12? I don't know, but it's that. And if you want to get a sense of like, okay, well, what is centimeters, blah, blah, blah. One thing I always do to get a sense of scene scale is grab a figure object. I call him Bob the figure object. And this is the scale of this Bob figure here is 180 centimeters. It's modeled to be about as tall as a 6-foot person, okay? So if you want to get a sense of how big your objects are in your scene as it relates to real world scale, put Bob in there and he'll show you what's going on. So this is like the size of a basketball, right? And this is the size of like, that ball in Times Square that drops, right? On New Year's. So if you want to get a sense of like how big a deal scale is when it comes to not only lighting, like you want to have your lights be real world scale. So if you have a softbox, like you can see the softboxes, I know people online can't see it, but we have softboxes all around and they're like that big, right? So if you want a softbox in your scene, it's probably going to be this size. Very rarely do you have a softbox this size unless you're doing like a car commercial. So with lighting, with dynamics, scale matters. So let me just show you, this is the same exact objects, they're just different scales, right? Same exact settings on these cloth objects too. So if I hit play, you're going to see how much of a difference that they look completely different simulations. So if you were doing a simulation, you're like, oh, I want a lot of wrinkles, but you modeled your sphere and your cloth to be massive, the reason why you're not getting these fine wrinkles is because your cloth, which you think is the size of like a napkin or a handkerchief, is actually the size of like a giant rug or a carpet or a giant massive flag, all right? So scale, very, very important. Just want to point that out right away. You won't be able to get the type of looks that you want if you're not working with the correct scene scale and stuff like that, okay? So now that we got a handle on like cloth and some of the settings and some of the gotchas, let's do some fun stuff with it. So one of the big things you can do with cloth is have it get affected by forces as well as field forces. How many people have used field forces before? All right, sweet. So field forces was added maybe a few versions back, maybe 20, 25 or something like that. And what field forces allows you to do is, let me just revert to save. Field forces allows you to use fields as particle forces. So remember how I said the new simulation systems are particle based? So what that means is you can go to the simulate menu here, and these are all your particle forces that can affect your cloth. So if I add turbulence in here, let's go to this plane, let's right click, simulation tags, cloth. Let's go to our scene settings here by Command or Control D, and now we'll turn off gravity. And if I turn off the turbulence and I just hit play, you just have this flat plane, nothing's happening at all. The moment I turn on turbulence though, and let's crank up the values here, and the scale, whoop, now we're getting this really cool kind of stuff going on. And this is literally just like a turbulence object here. So if you don't know like what's going on with the turbulence, basically turbulence is just adding like a noise, and it's using that noise to just undulate the cloth. The strength is the overall power of that noise and how it's affecting and how much it's pushing those particles, and in effect pushing the cloth, the mesh. And the scale is how big that noise is. So if I have a big noise like this, you're going to get this really cool kind of spinny thing. If it's a tiny, tiny noise, let's go back. You can see that it's just like really nice, ripply. So one thing that's cool is just like double up on these. So I got like a big turbulence and a tiny turbulence, and you kind of combine them together and mix those details. Frequency is, you can see all that undulation. That's just the speed of the noise. So if you want to slow down the frequency, that's going to speed down or slow down that speed of that noise, so it'll undulate a little bit more. So those are like the turbulence fields, all that kind of stuff. Another thing that's really cool that I actually showed this in my CGraph presentation is if we go to simulate forces, rotation. And remember I did that like cool rotating cloth spin kind of thing. So if we hit play with this, it's like, woo, all right, we're rotating. So the rotation field, it's rotating around the Z axis here. So if I rotate this up, you can see that, all right, now we're rotating around the Z axis, but it's facing upwards. And another thing we can do is use fields to control these force objects. So now, let me just up the strength here. So now we're doing that spin thing, and that's literally how to get that spin look. It's like just a couple clicks. Like I don't know how long that took in X particles, but guarantee it probably took a little bit more clicks than this. But this is just forces and then using fields to control it. One of the really cool things we can do, let's go and let's grab a turbulent force just to get some nice undulation-y stuff going on in there. Like this. You bring that strength down. So just a little subtle turbulence. What we can do now is go to simulate forces, and let's go to field force. And what this allows you to do is use all of these different forces to manipulate your object. So if I grab a spherical force here, you can see all these little vectors here. And if I crank up the value, and one of the things that is a little, there we go. So you're seeing this is acting as like an attractor. So wherever I move this spherical field, the cloth is following. So if you wanted to like art direct your cloth flowing through your scene, and you know what, this isn't high detail enough. Let's add more subdivisions here. And then let's go into our simulation here. Let's bring this the substeps down to 15. And let's up the damping a little bit so this will make it look like it's a little bit underwater. And let's hit play again and grab the spherical field. Look at all those really nice wrinkles. And then we got this going, and we're just like, you know, could just move this around. Another cool thing you can do is let's go and let's just move this up and down. And you get this cool like wave effect. Something like that. Another cool thing is because of the strength is a positive number, it's going to add it's going to act as an attractor. If we make this a negative number, like negative 100, this is going to act as like a repelling force. So now it's like, no, cloth's like, no, stay away from me, spherical field. Get away from me. I've seen where you were in New York City. And then you can just like, and this is almost acts like as like a cloth brush to some extent, because it's like I'm just like manipulating this and like just sculpting the cloth. And this is kind of cool. And actually I've heard that in ZBrush there is a cloth brush. Am I lying? Does anyone know about that? I think there's a cloth brush in ZBrush. Yes? No? Yes? Okay, I'm being told yes. Yeah. But this is just super, super cool. So one of the things you can do now, let me just bring that back to 100%, is we can start stacking forces and fields on top of this. So let's grab, to make this not so uniform, let's make this like let's add like a layer of randomness on top of this. So random field, and let's do overlay. Is overlay the thing we want? Let's see. Yep. So if I turn that off completely, this is just going to have that attractor force. But if I add that random field, it's going to use noise to kind of break that up a little bit and make it look a little more organic. So we can adjust the scale there. And now we can move this spherical field around. And let's up the strength of this field force to 150 maybe. Let's up this even more, 350. And maybe even more. Let's do it. Let's go 1,000. Let's get crazy. There we go. Now we're starting to see some stuff. Maybe I need to bring down the random field. This is a nice thing too, where it's like these are acting like layers. So I can, see the overlay mode there was doing something there. So if I just pull back on the layer strength there, and you again like blending modes just like Photoshop as well. So let's bring the spherical field. And now we can have this like cool animation, but let's say you wanted to like keyframe this where you're moving this spherical field. We can easily do that with something called cappuccino. Who has used cappuccino before or even knows what it is? Other than the coffee. Coffee's good. All right. Has anyone used After Effects? I think it's called Motion Trace. Is that what it is? So it's the exact same thing, right? Where Motion Trace, what it does is you can move an object, a layer in After Effects, move it around the screen. It's going to record all those keyframes of wherever you move stuff. Cappuccino is exactly that. And it's pretty incredible because now what you can do is Cappuccino's right. Is it there? I don't know why the icon isn't just like a cup of coffee. I don't know. But it's a mouse. So if you click on Cappuccino right down there, basically all you have to do is like just determine what aspects of this object you want to record. Position, scale, rotation, point level animation. For us, we're just going to need to record position. And then all this other stuff is exactly great as it is. We want this to just like start at the current time and then just end whenever we release our mouse. And so all we need to do at this point is click Start Real Time. And then it's not going to start until you actually click your mouse. And then I can start moving this around. See how there's that like trail of dots? So those are all keyframes. So now I can just like art direct this and move this around and have this cloth move exactly how I want it to move. Let's actually make this a little bit bigger too. And you can see that I just released my mouse and that stopped that mouse recording. And you can see down here all of these keyframes. If I go into the timeline, we got all of these keyframes here. And if I hit tab to go to my F-curve, you can see all those keyframes. Let's actually see, can we go to, you can actually reduce the keyframes here. Let me see if I can find the actual thing here. Going off script. There is a thing where you can reverse, let's select one of these, select all of these, right click. Let's see. If I can't find it in 5 seconds, I'll just bail on this. Function, key reducer, boom. All right, just before that 5 seconds, I was going to give up. So key reducer, what it allows you to do is, it's aptly named, it allows you to reduce keyframes. So if you click and slide this, you can actually remove keyframes just like that. Don't want to bring it too far, you're just going to remove all your keyframes. So there we can like clean up our keys a little bit so we don't have like 500 keyframes. And that just is a nice way to clean that up. So now if we hit play, whoop, it's a little jittery. We can smooth that out. So now we just recorded our mouse animation, and now we got this really cool thing happening, which is pretty nice. And you can stack field forces and add different stuff on top of it. The one thing that I hope is added is at the current moment, unless I'm missing something, the field forces here, or actually the forces here, do not interact with the field forces just yet. So the turbulence is actually getting overridden by the field force. And this is being continually developed, so I'm sure they'll just gonna, Maxon's gonna eventually add that back in. But yeah, this is just super, super cool. Let's go to, let's see. Let's show some more field force stuff here. So I showed a bunch of cloth. Let's show some ropes. Show you the ropes. Everyone's used that dad joke. Feel for this rope stuff. So rope dynamics, basically spline dynamics. Let's go. And one thing that's really cool is there is a segment capsule. If you don't know capsule, it's kind of like a whole separate presentation. But it's basically like built off the new object system that they're building behind the scenes, the node-based object system. So, in the spline menu here, one of the things I always wish Cinema 4D had was just like a spline, just a single line primitive. And with the segments here, if you just type in SEG, the segment will show up. And I'll just add that. And basically, this is just a spline. Let me turn off this plus right here. This is just a spline, and you can adjust the amount of points that are on it. So you don't have to like subdivide it or anything like that. But let's change this so this is up and down. Whoops, what'd I do? So we'll just rotate this like so and move this up. And let me close out of this. And let me grab a plane object. And we'll make this a little smaller. There's my spline. What we're going to do is we'll right-click on the spline, go to Simulation, not cloth, but rope. And then plane, right-click, go to Simulation Tags, Collider, because we want this spline to collide into that. And you can see that it just like a stiff piece of pasta. And that's because we don't have very many subdivisions or points on that. So this is the nice part about using the segment here is we can up the segments and get something like that. So rope dynamics, and then let's add some geometry there. So let's grab an end side, and let's shrink this down. And again, real world scale. So a rope is not like 12 centimeters. 12 centimeters would be a rope that thick, so maybe half a centimeter. And then let's throw this in a sweep. And then segment, and now we got a nice little rope. And of course, we can up the segments even more. And we got some nice rope. So what we can do with this now is let's actually clone a bunch of rope. And let's turn off gravity as well. And let's bring back our plus sign here. So we got a sweep. And what we want to do is clone a bunch of these. Now, there's a little workflow involved in cloning a bunch of rope dynamic splines. And how you do that is by bringing in a cloner. You're going to bring this in your hierarchy here, and you're just going to put your segment or your spline underneath that cloner. And let's use radial. Let's do this. Let's just rotate this like so. And we're going to place the rope tag on the cloner and not the segment. And then what we can do is hit play, and nothing's going to happen. Or actually, you're not even going to see more ropes here because the sweep object is only sweeping one spline. So to make the sweep object recognize all of the clone segments, all the clone splines, all we're going to do is use the Swiss Army knife of Cinema 4D, which is the connect object. Place the cloner underneath the connect, and voila, we now are sweeping all of these splines that are being cloned. So if we up the count a little bit, and then we have this object here act as a collider as well. So this is just a plus sign with a vibrate tag on it, so it's just going to move around a little bit. Woo! Something like that. And so now we just got all these, just hitting all these pool noodles like that. Now, one of the really cool things with field forces, and this has been, you've been able to do this for a while now, is you can use objects as attractors. So let's go back into our simulate forces, field force. And again, like all of the workflows you've used with forces before, like objects can be used as field forces, splines, all that kind of stuff. So if we just drag and drop this object into that field force area, it's going to be using the points or the surface. We can actually use the surface of this to act as a force. And now you can see all these vectors. If I up this radius, so this is how far out this force is going to be like an attractor. And let's up this strength, and you see all those vectors getting even longer. And now you can see, oh, this is actually being a repellent. So let's actually bring a negative number in here. And now, hopefully you can see, well, it's still being a repellent. Let's go back, hit play. There we go. So now all the noodles are getting attracted, which is pretty cool. And like, there might be some intersections. So if you have some intersections, go into your dynamics tab. If you have popping, again, that's where you up the smoothing. Collisions, this is where if you're seeing objects intersect with each other, you want to up these numbers. Another thing with the rope dynamics is you can actually set what your radius is. So it's very important to kind of match this radius with whatever your radius is here. So 0.5, 0.5, that should be good. So now we just have this really cool noodly attract kind of thing. And maybe we want those noodles to bend a little more. That's where we can go into this bendiness tab, bendiness field there, and just up the bendiness value. And we get something that looks like this. Now, one of the coolest thing with the new simulation system is it's like fast, it's stable. Where you had very complex cloth, things would explode. Same with splines. Like, let's just up the cloner here to like 50. Let's go 100. Let's do it. See what happens. So now we got, let's hit play here. Now we got 100 splines interacting with each other. And so you can see there's some intersection there. But again, we can just up some of these settings here. But we got like spaghetti flying in the air. And I love using objects as attractors because you can get really cool effects like this that literally took, you know, a few clicks, right? All right, let's see. We got about 20 more minutes. Let's see what else we can get into. One of the really cool things, now we're talking about cloth and ropes and soft body dynamics and all this stuff. The nice thing is that it's all unified, which means they all play with each other. In the old dynamic systems, cloth was separate, soft bodies was separate, spline dynamics was separate. So if you wanted splines to interact with soft bodies, they didn't see each other. Now that's fixed because, again, it's unified. So we can do something like this and have these splines. So we have objects with these splines on a rope tag, cloth, and then I'm just going to like squeeze this in. And so we got this nice little cloth interacting with the rope there. Really, really nice. Let's go. Whoop. Let's see if there's a slide for anything here. Oh, so this is just an example of like some of the high detail cloth you can get as well. Like how I just cloned all those splines. Like you could do, let's clone. Do I still have, yeah. So let's do this. And this is really cool. I just saw this. Someone posted something just today. I think they used Vellum in Houdini where they had like a bunch of, I think it was like spherical pieces of cloth. So let's grab a disc here. Let me just drag and drop this, the cloth tag on the disc and B so you can see those subdivisions. Let's up the segments here, something like that. And let's actually, because how this is subdivided, it's way more dense in the center than the outside. So one thing that's really nice to be able to use is a remesher. Remesher is incredible. It's really awesome. It is from ZBrush, and it allows you to just like remesh something and kind of make everything more evenly subdivided here. So we can bring down the mesh density here to something maybe like that. Let's make that editable. And now what we can do is let's clone a bunch of these. So let's just be the disk. And let's clone. Got a little bit of lag with this mouse. Let's go to linear. And let's just clone a bunch of these close together like little pancakes. And if you want to clone a bunch of cloth, you need to apply the cloth tag onto the cloner here. So we'll go simulation tag cloth. And let's hit play. And you can see how we got this like nice little thing like that. Just kind of cool. But you can have multiple cloth here. Dang it, mouse. Let's go. My mouse has not had enough coffee today. It's like very slow. Let me just up the count here. Because this is the great thing about it. It's like, again, like I'm just amazed playing and experimenting with this stuff all the time. It's like amazing what you can do and just like how far you can push the new cloth system. So here I have 34 little clothy things. Hit play. And now we can kind of like move all these together. And let's add some more wrinkles in here as well. So bendiness, 9999. And of course, if you want even more detail, we would subdivide these meshes, but like you can do these like multiple stacked pieces of cloth fairly easily and get really, really cool looks like that. All right, let's go to another thing that's really cool, which is, I think I got a slide for this. Dynamic connectors. And this is really, really awesome what this allows you to do. So in the old simulation system, come on, mouse, you can do it. There we go. Mouse. All right. So in the old simulation system, if you wanted to connect something to something else, you would have to like literally select those objects and connect it to it. In the new versions of Cinema 4D, we can, let's do this. We can use something called dynamic connectors to do the same thing. So if we wanted to connect all of these pieces of cloth to this plane right here, and let's actually put the default cloth settings in here, or default segments in there. We want to connect all these strips of cloth to this object. What we're going to do is first remember that if we want to add cloth to cloned objects, we need to place that cloth object on the cloner. And then this plane object here, we also are going to need to have be dynamic, because how we're going to connect these two groups of objects together is using something called, let me right click, go to simulation tags, connector. So this is called a dynamic connector. It connects two dynamic objects together. It's very aptly named. So to have this work with this plane object, and before what you would do is you'd go into the dresser and you'd actually have to physically select the points that you want to attach to another object. Go into here, select all those points, hit set fix points, and then if you wanted to update that, you'd have to go back in, select all your points, hit this again. It was a pain in the butt. This is much easier. So using the dynamic connector, first thing we need to do is if we want these objects to connect to this plane, we need to make this plane object dynamic. So we're going to go to simulation tags, cloth. And so now everything, let's see, gravity's on, so that's great. And now what we got to do is go to this connector, dynamic connector here, and let's check on update live. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to up this search radius. So this is just how far out this connector is trying to find objects to connect to. And you can see all of these little connections being built here, which is really nice. And so that's saying like, okay, it's finding two dynamic objects to connect together. So let's hit play here and wait for it. Whoop. Everything's just going to start falling. And I do have some friction and turbulence in here, but you can see that those objects are connected together. But what if we wanted to say like, hey, plane object, stay where you're at. Just stay fixed and just let all the little dangly bits just be dangly bits, right? So another important thing is that you can see how low subdivided our cloth is. Whoops. Let's bring this back. So the dynamic connector is it's making connections based off of vertices. So if your object here, like if our plane had a segment of 1 and 1, and we tried to up this connector, you can see that it's like, okay, it's just connecting to the edges there because these are where the vertices are. So if we wanted to make connections right here, 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 and here, we just need to make sure that our geometry that we're using as a connector has enough connections. And then anytime you up the segments or you move everything, to update it, just go to your dynamic tag here or your connector tag and just like, boop, just touch that and it'll update. Another thing I like to do is because I always have to finagle that, I'm just going to click and drag to move that search radius in here, right click and just show always. And then if I click off that, I can always adjust this and tweak this. So if I, if I up the, let's actually select this and up the height and count, count width and height, and you're going to see that everything just stretched out. And that's only because we just changed the terms of the connector, and all we got to do is touch that again, and that updates. And now we hit play. Again, we need to make sure this top cloth is in place. So to do that, it's very simple. All we got to do, and this was added in 2023, this mix animation tab. All right, no viruses. That's sweet. Thank you. So now all we got to do is this mix animation was added in 2023, and this acts as the old follow position, follow rotation. So if you wanted a dynamic object, but you wanted it to just stay into place, this is exactly what this does. So what we're going to say is like, all right, this object, this dynamic object, check this on, and it's kind of how they name these things is a little weird. So mix animation is like, if your object has animation in it, it's going to respect that animation but have dynamic stuff go along with it. But if you don't have any animation on that object and it's just static, it's just going to stay right there. So if I hit play now with pins activated, you're going to see that now this object right here is in place, but I can freely rotate this around and animate this and do whatever I want, and these little ribbons will kind of follow along with it, which is really cool. So I can go in here. Let's go back and let's undo those rotations there. And I can make command click and drag to duplicate this. And since we updated that and added a new object, we're going to need to touch that a little bit and see how the connections are here. And then what we can do is let's right click on both of these animation tags, vibrate. And this is just like the wiggle expression kind of deal. And let's just crank up some random rotation in here, hit play. And now let me actually make this a negative rotation. So now well, that's a little too much. Now we can have things kind of rotate around. And this is like no keyframes involved whatsoever. There's some intersections and stuff going on there. But we can totally fix that with some of these collider settings here. We can slow everything down, make it look like it's underwater with the damping as well. Really, really cool stuff. Now, the one last thing I'm going to show is, again, there's just like not enough time to show all the cool stuff you can do here. Let's do... where is the thing? Cloth. I really need to name things better because it's like cloth thing, other cloth thing. Let's just do it from scratch. Let's do it from scratch. I know how to do it. I've trained extensively in just this. So let's do 100 by 100 plane there. I'm going to right click. Going to do cloth. And then we are going to add any spline will do here, but I'm going to grab a helix. And let's just crank up the end angle here so it's a lot of spirals. Start radius, let's shrink that down. Height, we'll bring that down to 0. And let's just up the end angle here a lot. So we got this little spiral, and then we'll rotate this down like so. And so now we have this spline. let's make this dynamic. So we'll go to render tags. We will add a rope. And well, actually, we don't want a spline, or we don't want a plane. We need a cube, because what we're going to do is we're going to inflate this up. So to have any inflation, you need a closed mesh. So let's just make this 200 by 1 by 200. Let's up the segments here, like so. And let's delete that plane. And now we got a cloth tag on here. And let's make sure gravity is off. And A. And let's do something like that. And now what we can do is let's do some inflation here. Now to inflate, let me just go to this cloth tag here. And inflation forces is called balloon. And so I'm just going to check on balloon. And we got two values here. The first one is what is the strength of that ballooning, the overpressuring, the inflation? And then over what period of time do you want that inflation to go from 0% inflation to that full overpressure value? And why they add that in here, let me just, let's do 40 and see what this does. So between frame 0 and frame 50, we're going to have this nice inflation. Now what happens if we do this and the expansion time is 1? So that's where things get a little crazy. And you can see that the dynamic spline's actually interacting with this as well. But that's why the expansion time's in here, because we used to like keyframe this, right? We used to keyframe the strength of this over time, which you can still do, keyframe the pressure. But this is looking nice. To get rid of these like weird ripple things, let's grab Shift C. Let's add friction object. Like so, and let's bring this up to, don't be afraid with these forces objects to like really crank up the values to like, 100. And this should hopefully smooth this out. It's looking good. We can also go to the dynamic settings here, maybe up the damping a little bit. And now we got like a pillow, basically. But now what if we wanted to stitch the helix here, this spline right there, and like have that hold down the cloth and make it look like there's stitching anywhere that spline is? Well, what we can do is use that dynamic connector again. Simulation, dynamic connector. And then all we need to do is up that search radius here. And let's see here. We got this. Update live. Make sure that's on. Yep. So just make sure update live's on, and you can start to see that it's building connections on this mesh wherever there is the spline intersecting with this mesh, and it's building connections there, okay? So now, if we hit play, whoop, we got this cool inflation thing going on, and let's just up this Fong tag angle here to get rid of that like boxy thing, and that's looking pretty good. And what if we wanted to, let's bring down the pressure here as well, because this is a little too much, 30. And that's looking pretty nice. Let's add more wrinkles. This is a little too stiff. Yet another thing that was added in Cinema 4D 2023 was rest length. If you've watched any of my old tutorials on any of the old dynamic stuff, most of those techniques were done using this target length. What this target length does is basically allows your mesh to either grow or contract or shrink from the original size. So if I have a target length of 85, let's just let this play back again. It's just going to shrink in. But if we have a target length of 115, it's going to expand out, and we're going to get this cool kind of, it's going to let the cloth grow and expand. And you can see right off the top, we're getting these cool wrinkles, but everything's kind of expanding because our spline is also dynamic. You can see it floating around out here. So what if we wanted to have our spline just stay where it is and not be, still be dynamic, but not be reacted with all these dynamic forces? So remember how we did that with the plane object and the little dangly bits. We went to that object and we used the mix animation. So there's mix animation on the helix too. And if we say, okay, with pins, let's just pin this down. So the spline will be dynamic, but it's not going to move anywhere. And so if we hit play now, you'll see the spline is intact. And now this is just going to like inflate And another thing we can do is like, all right, let's actually increase the size of this spiral, and let's make this, whoop, not that. Let's increase the end angle here as well, so we get even a tighter spiral. And again, remember we have to update this, so it looks like Spyro Gyro. So we just need to make sure we update this a little bit there, and we can even up the max connections, and we can also adjust how many intermediate points are on the spline. You can see these are spaced away fairly well. If we just up the number here, whoop, this is going to increase the amount of subdivisions on our spline. And again, we look like Spyro Gyro again, so let's hit this and literally just touch it. And you'll see now we have more connections, more density with those connections. Let's up it even more. Why not? Let's do like 65. And again, we'll have to update this again. So now we have all these connections here, looking really nice. And now what we can do is inflate this again. And we got this, whoop, inflated too much. So let's just get the overpressure down to like 20. Whoop. And this is cool too, because you can even like keyframe the overpressure and like have stuff pop out or like go down again. Whoop. So really, really cool stuff. What you can do in Cinema 4D 2023. And I'm sure I didn't even get to like soft body dynamics. And let me just show you really quick. Okay, I got the thumbs up to show you really quick one thing. So that's inflation with cloth. Soft body dynamics, like I've barely touched at all. Yes, educational, sure. Let's do, if anyone has watched my channel, there's an OG iDesign tutorial where there's the letter 8, and it looks like a bubbly 8, and I inflate and deflate it, and it was like a half-hour tutorial, and yes, I talk a lot too, but it was a lot of stuff. It's much easier now, just to say, like with all the new things that have been added since I probably did that tutorial in Cinema 4D R17 or something like that. But let's just say we want to make the bubble text first. So we got a text object, and what we're going to do to make it nice and bubbly is we're just going to throw it in a volume builder and a volume mesher, and you can see that we got like all this janky geometry. Well, now with the remesher, we can throw that in the remesher, and we're going to get a nice, woo, like look at that nicely subdivided mesh right there. And so what we're going to do with that is we're just going to connect a current state to object, and we'll turn all these off. So there's our 8. And then what we're going to do, let's just move this up a little bit. And we're going to do some inflation here. So let's right click, simulation tags, soft body, which I like the little jellyfish guy here. That's a pretty cool icon. Like if I wanted a shirt with this, like an icon from Cinema 4D, it'd be jellyfish, jiggle deformer. I mean, come on, that's a cool icon. And then the melt, like top 3 icons in the new system, like jellyfish up there. Anyways, soft body, let's turn that on. And so that's on, and let's hit this, let this hit play, and we got bloop, this little thing like that. And what we can do is that same trick where we can go into the mix animation, check on with pins. And again, what that's going to do is it's just going to hold it into place. But what we can do with this is control the influence of the pin effect with a map or a vertex map. So what we can do is just add a vertex map here. Text map. So there it is. You can actually apply vertex maps to like a MoText object as well. You don't need to make it editable anymore, which is super cool. But then let's go into here, and we can use forces on your vertex map to control it. And let's go to linear field. And so now, let's actually hide. So this is just a floor. I'm just going to hide that real quick. So what we can do is, with this vertex map in the field, we can control the strength of that vertex map strength. So whatever's red is 100% strength, whatever's yellow, 0%, and then you blend in between 0 and 100%. So what we can do with this is go into this cloth tag, drag and drop that vertex map into the map here. And basically what we can do now is control what parts of our object are stuck and which aren't. And so let's actually invert this. Let's go into our vertex map and invert, because We actually want the opposite. We don't want dynamics to happen right away. So let's do that. Hit play. And whoop. So it's inverted, but you can see what's going on. Let's actually rotate this around like so. Matthias is hulking over me, so we're wrapping this up. Cloth inflation. Deflate. Inflate. And let's actually just adjust these settings really quick. So in soft body, we can adjust the softness. So let's do just 888. And this will make it a little softer, and you get this bloop. Yeah. So that's inflation right there. Deflate, inflate, just a few steps. But yeah, so many things I wanted to get to, so little time. But if you want to learn more about cloth, I have a C-graph presentation that I did in 2022. You can find that on Cineversity. I have a cloth tutorial on School of Motion that just came out a couple weeks ago. And then just today, I did a little bit more in depth with that stitching effect. And I show you in the tutorial actually how to animate on the stitching as well. So check out, let me bring up that slide. One more slide. Whoop. All the things I didn't get to. Soft bodies. Oh, also if you want to, here's just some people that are really amazing, that are doing really cool stuff with cloth. Vincent Schwenk, if you don't know him, he's doing some of the coolest stuff. He's a Houdini guy. Same with Motion Punk Thanos. They both use Houdini and Cinema 4D, so they're like really trying out like some stuff that was made in Vellum, and then if they can do it in Cinema 4D as well. Subframe Studio, like follow all these people because they're doing incredible stuff and really testing the boundaries of the new cloth system. And then, yeah, this is me. Thank you so much.
All right.
You can follow me all to integrate. Yeah,
big round of applause for EJ, everyone. All right, we're gonna go through these kind of quick so we can get through them. Anybody in the audience question first? All right, cool. We'll go right to the internet. Internet is wondering, can you use the cloner to connect multiple cloths to an object using cloth belt tag?
So cloth belt is almost obsolete now because using the dynamic connectors, you can do that stuff easily.
So use the dynamic connectors.
Use the same technique that I showed with the cloned strips and then the main plane object, and you just use dynamic connectors. You don't need to select points anymore. That's the old laborious way of doing that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Someone was wondering, can you make the noodles stick? I think it was to the cross thing.
Yes.
Using the new sticky feature.
Yes, absolutely.
So yes, and then
all these things I couldn't get to, but yeah, there's just scratching the surface of what this new stuff can do.
And do you use do you do the sim with simpler primitives and then add thickness to the planes?
Yeah.
Or is that the workflow that you use?
Yeah, so you can totally, if you're using Redshift or Octane or whatever, you can totally use their @render subdivision stuff. But let me see if I have. Yeah, so my stack will be cloner and then cloth surface to thicken it and then subdivision surface to make it even more dense. So what you want to do is make sure that you're applying the simulation to the lower poly thing and then subdivide it either with your subdivision surface or right click, let's do that. Render tag, Redshift. Where are you, Redshift? Gotta switch this to this first. But yeah, those of you that don't know, if you go to render tags, Redshift object tag, go to geometry, override, tessellation. This is this Redshift version of subdivision surface, and it happens at render time, which is really great because it's not gonna, bog down your viewport or anything like that by having the subdivisions happening here. But yeah.
So that's the yes.
That's the yes.
All right. Awesome. Another big round of applause for EJ.
Thank you so much, everybody.
And stay tuned, everybody. We're going to get our next presenter up here in just a few minutes. So Dave Weinstock. So hang out, folks.